All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Eric Hubbard. Eric, how's it going?
It's going well, Michael. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. If you
Mm.
could start us off by telling us a little bit about your past, your present, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a story that I've told through the years. And it's one of those stories, if you believe in divine intervention, perhaps, or the laws of nature, either way, we ended up here. But Michael, I didn't meet a dentist until I was around 23 or 24 years old. I grew up
Mm.
in rural Oklahoma and, the same problems we have in rural settings, my family had them. And my mom developed cancer very young in life. And, through chemo, had some bone loss and some tooth problems and things like that there. And she just looked in the yellow pages for dentists. And keep in mind, this back in 1998, 1999 era. And my first memory of a dentist is that he would literally go sit with my mom during her chemo and he would just work on her partial, trying to get it to fit. No, those dentures never fit good for anyone. And,
Mhm.
and as life was happening, he went on and continued to work on his practice. My mom passed, and I went to Procter and Gamble and started working in direct-to-consumer
Oh,
marketing.
wow. Mhm.
And our stories come back together around 2014. This dentist, his name's John Barroso. I was in his practice, and he had talked about some of the challenges he was having in dentistry. He wasn't able to acquire patients the same way, and DSOs were just starting to come in, and the market had shifted from him. He knew I'd been in marketing the past 15, 16 years. And he just asked me, he just said, can you help me? For me, it was a wild time in my life. I had gotten married and had two kids all within this incredibly short, whatever math you can make that work. That's how quickly those, married and two kids happened. Not the best time for me to take on a side hustle, but I did because, like I said, I had such fond memories of him helping my mom.
Mhm.
One thing led to another, and we just started helping him from a marketing standpoint and helping change the culture of his front desk, helping make sure we were presenting it. But that's how we got into marketing. And next thing you know, one client became three and three became 10. And we started developing the team. And today we run right around 100 offices
Oh, wow.
marketing.
Wow. And the agency, your agency is what is
Hmm.
it called?
Pain-free dental marketing.
Pain-free dental marketing. Nice. So you guys have a lot of you do a lot of back end tracking, analytics, making sure dollars are spent well, right?
Yeah, well, the technology changes and the channels change from AI to all the different mechanisms we use to put an ad in front of a person. The question in marketing is and always has been, is my marketing working? Which part of my marketing's working? How do I tell if my marketing's working? What's my ROI? How many patients have I gotten? All of these are forms of the same flavor of question, which is, am I getting a return on my investment?
Gotcha. Okay, so then I know as marketing, right? We work closely also with front desk, doctors, and things like that, but mainly the front desk. And so we're going to be cutting straight into that in this episode, right? On that
Yes.
topic, how to transform your front desk into a scalable, high converting system without burning out your team. So, Eric, let's kick things off. Can you walk me through the exact steps you take to analyze a front desk current phone system from that first call to a booked appointment?
Since so much of dentistry and overall healthcare happens over the phone,
Hmm.
we very quickly discovered the need that if I can't understand what is happening on the phone between that potential or that prospective patient and the receptionist who's answering it, we quickly found, Michael, that was the quickest way. We used to have this joke like the quickest way to get fired is to get crossways with the front desk. And part of that is because the best marketing in the world, 10 of 10, perfect,
Hmm.
doesn't survive a front desk that can't convert them to a patient. So
Hmm.
we ended up partnering with CallRail back in the day, many years ago, and have since then. What my team is, we've listened to those calls. When a client joins us, we listen to all of the marketing calls through that first stretch. So when I say we've listened to a lot of calls, I want you to know that I mean that factually probably north of 150,000. We have a team of 7 people who that is their job. And
Yeah.
while I think that AI has made incredible advancements in what they can and can't do, what we haven't particularly done great is the annotations and hearing the fear. We can analyze words and things like that in transcripts very well, but to have a human listen to it is, we find, still very powerful, especially for our high value clients.
Hmm.
So when I say I've listened to a ton of phone calls, I factually mean north of 160,000
Wow.
through the years. So for me, regardless of the system in place, it begins with taking time, just not being hurried. The biggest challenge we hear on the phones today, apart from the obvious, just rude, it's impatience.
Hmm.
It's someone calls and says, do you take my insurance? Or someone calls with a bunch of questions. We're trying to take a payment, or, we just got off a phone call, or I have someone behind me asking me a question. The first way to transform your front desk is just to slow down. You've made this investment that is somewhere between 3 and 6% of your net revenue, most likely. But yet, you're trying to squeeze everything you can out of this employee who's answering the phones. And I think they need to slow down.
Hmm.
And the biggest change you can make is take your time on that call. Get behind the question of they're asking. If you say, do you take my insurance? Michael, can you tell me why that's important to you?
Hmm.
Because if you need 3 or 4 crowns, your insurance is not going to be very helpful to you. And I'm going to answer the letter of your question, but let me answer the spirit as well of this question, because most patients, when they're asking a question, are asking a very ignorant question. It's well-meaning. Can I even go here if you don't take my insurance? If I just need a cleaning, just a cleaning, that's pretty cut and dry on the importance of insurance. But if I need any additional work, it gets gray. So the first one really is just slowing down and being curious.
Yeah, I like that. So real quick, if we rewind a little bit, you mentioned CallRail. Why CallRail?
CallRail for us, number one, it keeps us compliant with the laws in each state around disclosing recordings and things like this. It's rock solid.
Hmm.
So we put the JavaScript on the site that swaps the numbers, so the numbers are there. And the user interface they have grown accustomed to around how to listen to those calls. And specifically, Michael, I like that we tag calls. So we'll tag them. This is a new patient opportunity and the treatment. And, did they discuss insurance or financial conversations? And as we record and I'll say dispositioning because we're not call coaches. We are a marketing company. The calls are the closest thing we get to the money, if you will, of determining did we put a patient in that practice. We tag those calls. And what that helps us do is, number one, on the back end, it works with our strategists and our channel managers to hone the marketing into, are we driving effective patients? And the client services team can use those tags we can send the front desk team or we can send the doctor, hey, these are the calls that concern us right now. And you can listen to these 3 or 4 calls and get a vibe of what we're hearing. And we recommend getting a call coach. We recommend getting some training put in place, things like this. So CallRail to us is a really nice mechanism that we can give access to our clients. We can keep high level of access. We can tag calls. And the features we use allow us to not only change our own marketing, but also impact the efforts of the office.
Gotcha. What have you noticed from CallRail that you give to your clients for the practices, right? Where they're like, this is incredible right here, what you're giving me.
It's a very unsexy answer, but access to the recordings, the metadata around them. Did they come in through a Google search term? Did they come in from a video campaign? Did they come from social media? Did they hit the website? And when we can get the people who are answering the phones engaged in the platform and they can listen to the recording and hear their own tone of voice, because that's what makes us sound rushed, right? Is, a very rapid speech or cutting someone off across a question. And then access this metadata around where they came from. What I can do with that, Michael, is I say, okay, this call came from the term dentist near me and it came from a search term. Okay, just for the record, that might cost me $17, $18 a click in some states. So, you need to know that this might have been a $100 phone call when you look at sort of the overall cost of a call, the cost of acquiring a new patient. And when we can use CallRail to begin to articulate the marketing spend and how we're allocating those funds and where this patient came from, it provides more context for the person answering it to actually slow down because it's not just a call now, they're part of the investment into the
Hmm.
marketing plan. And for me, that's what CallRail's allowed us to do. It's enabled those conversations. I can show you where the source of someone. Now, obviously, as marketers, we know that multi-channel attribution is incredibly complex. And even if I said, hey, you should call this doctor, you're likely to go hit reviews and hit a website. And I don't believe in single source of attribution, but it gives us the opportunity to have a more complex conversation.
Gotcha, gotcha. Interesting. Awesome. So then one thing I know, we fast forward a little bit, you mentioned that I love that you mentioned is like listening to not just the letter of the question, but the spirit of the question, right? Like the feel of it. What are some common language mistakes front desk teams make that instantly lower the trust or lose appointments?
Yes and no to a question. Do you take Delta insurance? Yes, is the first one that comes to mind. And that, I'm going to beat you over the head probably with the theme of slow down and get behind the question. Yes and no questions. I find, and I have not personally listened to 160,000 calls. I've listened to a fair amount, but the team has. The data, if you look at most classically bad calls, and I'm not talking about the rare exception of the worst call I ever heard was someone called and said, I've read about this all on four procedure that is done. I don't have dental insurance. I know it's expensive. I want to get it done. Okay, now keep in mind, this is probably a $22,000 an arch, case. And she wanted both arches done. So that's a $50,000 procedure. The front desk says, that sounds really expensive. We don't take your insurance here, and hung up. Now, the lady obviously was confused around the insurance because she said, I have insurance, but she also self-reported that she knew it was expensive and still wanted to do it. And while that is a very rare example, it does highlight the ignorance behind most of the questions we ask when can I come here? Are you seeing new patients? These types of things. So for me, it gets back to we need to slow down, have a friendly tone, and be more curious. And it's hard to be curious when do you take my insurance? Yes. And it's hard to be curious when you're rushed. And I would say that's the other thing we need to look at. What am I asking of this employee through the day beyond answering phone calls? Because when a phone call comes in, our average client is spending somewhere around $4,500 to $5,000 a month in marketing. So that's a $5,000 investment. Do I really want that person sounding rushed on the phone?
Interesting. I love that way to look at it. So then what are actual words or phrases your best performing practices use on the phone that almost always lead to bookings?
Predominantly, it's some form of tell me more about that. Why is that important to you? The phrase, I can see insurance is important. Have you ever been happy with working with insurance? There's a book, The Challenger Sale, that talks about this, but the best performing offices, Michael, aren't as friendly as you would think. In fact, they tend to be more almost shocked that you don't want to come to this practice. So it's moving, clear as the new kind. Gosh, Michael, it sounds like the cheapest deal you can get is really important to you. That's not going to be our office. Our office is about providing great care, and we're not going to let the insurance company dictate that care. We are going to work with you. We have insurance plans. So I will say, Michael, the best offices, first of all, they get behind the question, establish some trust, and then they rush out in front and start to address some payment plans and some money. So it's around shifting the paradigm of, do you want the cheapest? Because that may not be us. If you want amazing quality, that is us. The trait that the highest performing offices have in common tend to be around building that trust initially. And then the words almost start to be challenging in that, is this the right home for you? Because this is who we are. Hey, listen, there are cheaper places to get just a cleaning. That's not what we do here. And they tend to be more sales focused. I don't use salesy sales. I mean, standing firmly in their own truth of who they are. And there's no question of the value they provide to prospective patients. They're not trying to negotiate with you on value. They're saying, Michael, this is my bar. This is what I do. Do you want to come here? Now, they're not saying it is so on the nose, but that's the spirit of it. As far as direct phrases, it tends to be, I can see that insurance is really important to you. By the way, while it's helpful here, based on the care you need, we have an in-house financing plan that we can provide you. We use Cherry and some other tools here. And it's options to pay. Dentistry hasn't changed in 250 years as far as the reasons people don't come. It's anxiety, which I think we get wrong, and money. And the money ones, both of them are more complicated, I believe, than people give credit. But if you're going to have a big case, it's not just the money you're spending. It's that you might be denying your family a big vacation or someone you love something different too, because you're wanting this cosmetic case or whatever it is.
Gotcha. Interesting. So then the wording behind it, it's more like open-ended questions. So if we were to say, hey, do you take my insurance, right? You're kind of like, oh, well, hey, Eric, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it. Let me check real quick. Although but you're buying yourself that time, right? Like, let me check real quick. And in that space, you're kind of like, what procedure are you looking to get done? Or what are you,
Yeah,
what
what
made
problem
you?
you having?
And then in that moment, that's when they're like, oh, I just want a cleaning. Or, oh, I've been thinking about this or
Mhm.
whatever. And then we go from there, ask more open-ended questions.
Yeah, because if I say I've been great, I just moved here and I just need a place to have my cleanings done, you know that insurance probably is really important to them. If they say, yeah, I've been thinking about Invisalign or I've never been happy with my smile, at that point you can begin to pivot the conversation around to insurance may not help you. Certainly if you're not getting veneers and things like that, potentially on some crowns, maybe, but at some point we're outside of what insurance can provide. That's how you get out of this just a cleaning phone calls. And I will say the other important thing that is happening is the most successful offices are asking for the sale. And that seems easy, but I'm not leaving it nebulous on what I want to happen. I'm saying, Michael, I know you want to be a patient. I know that your insurance plan is important to you. As I said, we are out of network. We can still file. We do have an in-house plan to help you. Would you like to make an appointment here? And I know that seems silly of like why we're not asking for a sale, but many don't. And they just sort of assume that because I've said no to you that you're going to not schedule. But at the end, almost having, I don't believe in scripts. I personally don't like them because I think they sound robotic over time. I do like bullet points of establish a connection, get behind the question, offer solutions, and then ask for the sale. And in doing that, I'm allowing some nuance with the conversation, but I am also very strictly asking for the sale. And if I'm scheduling you, hey, is there a wife? Do you have kids that I should also put on the schedule for when you come? That's another way to add patients to your schedule that high performing offices do as well.
Okay, interesting. So then let's talk about metrics and accountability without burnout. What
Hmm.
KPIs do you measure weekly to ensure the team is converting calls effectively?
We're looking at the number of new patient opportunities that they were given, regardless if they were a good candidate or not. You're going to get into trouble, and when you dig into statistics, they tell a story. But at some point, even if your scale is broken, if you weigh the same every day, you're going to have a consistent pattern. So
Yeah.
think in terms of patterns versus 30% or 37%, right? So we're looking at the total new patient opportunities over how many do we close? How many new patients actually got put on the schedule? And I'm not getting into did they come from Google? Did there was a referral? Because as I turn on marketing, raising tide raises all of those ships. So, we expect all of them to increase referrals as well, even though you would not call that classic digital marketing.
Hmm.
The one we look at is just how many new patients got scheduled over how many phone calls. And we track that. Not only are we tracking it for that office, we're tracking it for other suburban offices or urban or rural areas. We're looking at fee for service versus our insurance focused practices. And we're able to then articulate and have a conversation around why we may not be closing as many or why we're closing well above. Is it shifts to marketing we need to take? Or is someone new now answering the phones that is not as patient or not as complete in the conversation? That's what we track for our clients.
Okay, gotcha. And so then when it comes to the accountability part of that, how do you hold team members accountable to those metrics without creating tension or burnout?
It's tough. And you get into correlation and causation. Is the 3 or 4 calls that we need to do better contributing to burnout, or did burnout contribute to the poor call performance? I would have trouble answering that question on any given because I'm not sitting next to them in the practice and I don't know what's
Hmm.
happening in their personal life. I know for us, we've tried very hard to reward good calls over being punitive around bad calls. So there are times that someone will call in an emergency situation or in pain, or there was a miscommunication around how much insurance was going to pay or whatever, how much I was going to be billed, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
When they turn those around, we'll send them a gift card. We try to make sure to reward them is one way that we're trying to show positivity in the calls. There is something around sending a bad call to them and say, hey, not this is between us because I don't like secrets, but hey, would you listen to this call? It sounds like you were really busy. So the positive way, send them gift cards, showing them care and, attention. Other ways that have been very effective is asking what kind of training they would like. Hey, here's a couple of coaches we like. Here's a couple of programs we like. Are there any of these that interest you? Because to me, I know that someone who sells a series A of this is the only way to answer the phone, believes it. I think slowing down is the most effective. But I do acknowledge that different personality types need different training, or you might be a guy that loves a script and, that works for you. And because of your personality, you can make that work. Now, that may not work for me. So do one of these training programs interest you that we can help get you in? And I will say the last one that is the most effective, we try very hard to get them interested and excited about the marketing program. Because to a provider, a new patient, let's just talk simple math. As a dentist or as a healthcare professional, you're probably getting paid 30% of what you produce. So every new patient is more money for you. Again, if that is a $10,000 case, that's $3,000 that you personally put into your pocket on average. As an employee of the admin team, that literally just represented more work to you outside of some bonus system that maybe you got and maybe you didn't get. So getting them feeling heard, getting them that they have a voice, integrating some of their ideas into the marketing, we have found very helpful. And part of that is helping them understand these metrics from CallRail. And you asked me earlier, what do I think some of the best practices do? They are rewarding their team for full schedules, for conversion rates on the phones, and for overall performance. So there is some bonus system in place that represents the culture of the practice, however that may be. You talked about burnout. It is not fun to just have more work, because when you turn on marketing, there's just more calls that come in. And you're asking them to work harder for effectively the same amount of money. And when you transform that front desk, especially if you're dropping insurance plans, which I recommend most of them do, or you begin to make this different marketing investment. If I told you to call an office, Michael, you would probably call it, and you're probably not going to have a high barrier to entry. You're going to be like, oh, my buddy Eric sent me. But when you start to get a random internet lead or someone who just found you from dentist near me or drove by the office and Googled you and read some reviews, they are going to have more questions. It is not as warm of a lead, if you will, as a referral. And that is more work. Some bonus system in place is very helpful because you're asking them to do additional effort.
Interesting. Okay. And I like that you mentioned with CallRail. And I think that's super helpful, especially now, I think more for, I think just everybody, not just marketing agencies, but like front desk to see, because we can easily give them the metrics, the owner, right? Practice owner. And then they'll look at it. They're like, oh, okay. Because you've probably felt this too, Eric, where it's like, hey, the marketing's not working. And you're like, it is. It's just something in the front office where the ball's being dropped, right? So you show them the metrics, and then they're like, okay, cool. Now what? You got to explain the metrics, but now you're able to, with, I guess, CallRail, show them the recording, tell them where they can work on. Does that involve your team also to be trained a little bit more on identifying the intentionality of the speech, the tone, the words, and all that stuff, or?
No account in the history of dentistry has ever hired me to be Instagram famous or TikTok famous, right? You're making an investment into marketing and you want patients. To get patients, you have to put them on the schedule. To put them on schedule, you typically have to go through a phone call. While online scheduling is growing, the vast majority of appointments are now scheduled on the phone still. So now, those phone calls become important. And to your point, when our team is listening to those phone calls, because we've listened to so many, we're not getting into the style, but we are getting into the effectiveness. So I can tell you that on average, I'm seeing a 38% conversion of calls. And if there's a new patient opportunity, you need to be closing just north of 1 in 3. And if you're not, you may not have a marketing problem. There's some good reasons to not get a patient on the schedule. They want a Friday appointment and you're not open on Fridays. So we can't fix that. You're scheduling hygiene out 6 weeks, but you can see doctor side tomorrow. That's somewhat difficult. You're putting some barriers into your marketing plan there. I only want patients that need work done. Okay, well, don't we all want to make more and work less? There's some challenges there, but typically you nailed it. It's around the person who's answering that phone call has to be effective, and there are many ways to be effective. And we do need to radiate out the information around this is your close rate, if you will.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So then when it comes to high call volume and empty schedules, what would your process be if a practice is seeing a ton of calls, but their schedule stays empty?
There's a lot of training that needs to happen. It would be my first one. I don't advocate for turning over the front desk in today's, it's so hard to find someone who represents your values and cultures and things. But I do believe, Michael, the front desk is an underrated position of how important it is. It's not the most desirable job in the office. It tends to be where we put the newest people. And it's unfortunate because that is the first experience that most patients are having with your office. And do you really want that to be with the newest, greenest person? Is that where you want to be underfunded or undertrained? And
Mm.
I know culturally why offices do it, but those don't tend to be high performing offices for the record. I like it when the office and the doctor make investments in that team member. One of the best tools you can do is just be curious about them as a human. You may speak to your office manager regularly, your chair sides you know very well, but sit down and have a cup of coffee with the person who's answering the calls and ask them what challenges they're having. Ask them if they're happy with the phone they're using. Find a way to get them feeling involved, and that's going to help them slow down and be more effective.
Gotcha. So if they are getting a ton of calls and their schedule stays empty, you want to invest in their time more, be curious with them more, because obviously that means it's the front desk, right? Or no.
Typically, yeah.
Okay.
And you may actually have a problem. Let's assume you don't have a technical problem. And
Mhm.
by that, I mean, you go into CallRail and you see that there's a missed call report and you're missing 70% of your phone calls, perhaps. That's shockingly high. We do see offices missing 50, just so we're clear. And when I say 50, I mean during office hours, and that ain't good. And they think, oh, well, I'm calling them back. Well,
Uh-huh.
I've already moved on. The caller's already moved on to the next office. It may have been answering their phones. So let's assume for a second that we're not dealing with a technical issue of callers coming in and we're actually answering them. If you're
Mhm.
answering them, that employee is undertrained or the wrong employee. Now, there is some outside shot that they're going to miss calls and going to voicemail and you're not following up. CallRail doesn't, we personally don't use it on the outbound call side. The phone systems do that for us. But typically, you are going to have some cultural alignment problem with the front desk of this is just not a good employee, perhaps. That is rare, but if there's no technical issue, they're not going to voicemail and they're not getting on the schedule. Unfortunately, we're now down to that might be the wrong person for that seat.
Gotcha. Okay. You mentioned 50% missed during office hours.
That's rare, but I've seen it.
What was the scenario, if you don't mind me asking, the scenario for that? Even like a little less,
Mhm.
40% or anything like that. When you see stuff like that, typically what's
Mhm.
the scenario?
For good statistical relevancy, Michael, 15 to 16%, I would say, is pretty normal. And that's because going into CallRail and looking at your call numbers that come in over a given period of time, it fluctuates. There's a heavy calls in the beginning of the day. It sort of drills down right before lunch, and around lunchtime, it pikes back up, drops back down, and during the day, it tends to speak again. So number one, you're just going to you have limited lines and limited people answering. There's some calls that are going to get through. Typically, we see around 15%. Anytime you get north of 20, the person who's answering may have other responsibilities. They're turning over a room, cleaning the lab, whatever it may be, and they're not jumping on the phone in time. More often, however, we see that the office thinks they have lunch coverage and they don't, or someone's supposed to be answering the phones and they're not, or it's flipping over to voicemail. That tends to be a big one that gets missed is
Mhm.
if I were a dentist running an office, I would not send my calls to voicemails during business hours.
Yeah.
I would try to answer them. And that tends to be the biggest missed call. Now, CallRail will determine a missed call as something not picked up. But technically, a call that picks up on voicemail is not missed in the classic reporting, but we would call it missed because I'm not getting to the intent that caller did not pick up. But it typically revolves just a scheduling misalignment.
Gotcha. Interesting. And I know you mentioned about following up. They might leave
Mhm.
a voicemail or maybe something didn't happen. A call ends without a booking. And I know CallRail does have like something specific where they'll send a text message or like, hey, sorry, I missed your call. Is there anything like something specific that you can open-ended question, right?
Mhm.
Which I think
Mhm.
is awesome. But for you, is there a follow-up plan, automated or manual? Like, how do you make sure a lead doesn't go cold after they hang up?
I'll go back to the question you asked me is what are the best offices doing? And you didn't hear of it 5 or 10 years ago, except for the big implant centers. But We are now seeing, I'll say, normal offices implement a CRM that has some mechanism to follow up. And Michael, I saw you called. We sent you a text message. I just want to make sure I listened to the message. It sounded like you were in pain. I just want to make sure that you got taken care of. And by doing that, maybe you already booked an appointment because you found someone else between the time it took me to call you back. But I am putting it out there how much I care about you. And you may not have a great experience down the street. And again, I'm staying top of mind. So I do like a CRM or a customer relationship management tool that tracks the touch points, or we can drip out information to them. The automated follow-up, as you said, the text message and CallRail is fine. At some point, you got to get on the phone with the person and have a conversation and be more curious. But yeah, we're seeing improving the quality of post-call touch points and improving the understanding of it is going to be important as we, especially as you make a bigger marketing investment.
Yeah, interesting. And I know CallRail just came out with like voice assist. Now, that's where the AI answers the phone.
Mhm.
Is this something you see or you've already seen a lot of your practices utilize, or do you see it in the future? Like, is it like voicemail? Bye bye.
It remains to be seen culturally how we do it for dental. My experience is very limited to what happens on the phones in dentistry. And for dentistry right now, I think it's in its infancy and I think it's going to be very good someday. But right now, we are seeing the abandonment happen in dentistry because I need an appointment and the bar to join a dentist is a little higher than booking an appointment or scheduling my car for an oil change or whatever,
Mhm.
other ones I've heard them do. There tends to be more questions around EOB and some things like that that have to get answered that the AI is just not honed in and nuanced enough to really get to. I do not think we're far away, though. I think culturally, Michael, I think for many reasons, dentistry lags some best practices in what we would say on the internet, online scheduling being one. Some of it is around every dentist thinks that their schedule is some unique thing that only their team can recreate, when in reality, it's probably formulaic. As AI continues to improve in its learning and accept the inputs around how I want my schedule created and what I need to get a patient onboarded, we are going to trend to it because consumers are asking for it. The most requested thing out there is some form of automated scheduling where I don't have to talk to someone.
Yeah, where they can just kind of like go along with it.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, so then if someone were deciding a practice, like, okay, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna do this CallRail thing. I'm gonna like try to track it, all that stuff. How do you recommend someone utilize it from beginning to end?
CallRail has wonderful training and a wonderful onboarding program and the best practices they provide. They have so many things they can do now, from the chats to the AI stuff to, well, my team manually listens to calls. If you just want a higher level overview of what happens, they do have AI tools that analyze sentiment and things like that. I think just turn on all the features and see which ones you use, because it's almost overwhelming in what the amount of information they can provide you and the reporting they can provide back. And as you determine what fits the culture of your office, your management style, and the engagement of your front desk, I think, you can turn features on or off. But it's really been around, just following their best practices has done amazing things for our organization. Now, we run at such a scale. I mean, we have, I don't know, 150 or 140 some CallRail accounts at the moment. We're constantly evaluating what's working and what's not working and things like that. But we just follow the CallRail best practices. We're consuming the data. They're out there doing it every day.
Gotcha. So follow their best practice.
Follow their best practices. That's a boring answer, buddy, but it's a real one.
No, I liked it. I liked it. I appreciate it. Now, these next three questions are just to get to know you a little bit more.
All right.
So this one's called the dinner table.
All
You're
right.
hosting a dinner with three people who have left scathing or horrible reviews of your business. What's the first thing you'd say to break the ice?
My personality would probably make some joke around, well, this is awkward. That's probably what I would say to break the ice. I would try to take my own medicine and say, there's some commonality that the three of you have, and that's you had a bad experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm striving to get better, and tell me, let's get to it. It would be something around that. I hope I would use it as an opportunity to grow, Michael. Funny enough, that reminds me, there was a doctor one time, and you've been in business a minute too, and we all have we made bad decisions and fell down. There was a dentist that we didn't do right by. He was a good guy, ran a good practice. Michael, and as the world would have it. And, we tried to make right at the time, and he was really frustrated at us. And again, we just made some poor decisions and some things fell down. We ran into him at a conference.
Hmm.
And the worst thing, Michael, wasn't even me that ran into him, it was one of my people. And what we had done is we had taken that story about how we fell down and we actually added it to our company culture document. And we talked about it and like, well, this happened then, this doesn't happen anymore. And when my team ran into him, they knew his name, they knew the story, and they started talking to him about it. And I'm not saying he's our raving fan out there, but he was impressed that we took the time to learn and never do it again. And
Yeah.
I hope I would use that. I hope I would use that. Sending his three people that left bad reviews. I hope it would be something self-deprecating, but try to make it right.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that a lot. The poor decisions you mentioned that you made, do you feel like a lot of agencies make that same
Oh yeah,
decision? Could I ask specifically what were those poor decisions?
sure. It's funny. We all want vulnerability and realness in our life, and then you're presented with the opportunity. So here we go. We were growing fast. We had to get a website out and we were behind the eight ball in doing it. We had hired some people that didn't deliver. And so, we were growing fast. We had some staffing issues and it created a scenario to where we cloned a website and stood it up. And I say it was my company that did it and an employee made a poor decision.
Yeah.
And it went out there. It was obvious that it was copied and duplicate content, which is not it was not who we stand for. Not what, even back then, it's not what we were, but it happened. And it was really embarrassing. And there's duplicate content all over the internet. I know they have made the mental leap, but that was in violation of our core values, if you will.
Hmm.
I don't want copied sites. I don't want to take someone else's design or someone else's copy and stand it up. And it was really frustrating, but that was the decision that was made by the agency and it went out there. It went past the tech team, the client services team, everyone, and he caught it, rightfully so. And when he was frustrated, and this is where I think I had some growing to do, Michael, he caught it and he presented it to me. And I dismissed it. There's no way that would happen in my agency. So I literally compounded it by 10 by dismissing it. Like that didn't happen. With no facts, by the way. I was defensive and emotional. So it embarrasses me to even tell the story right now because it's such a lapse in who I want to be. But that is what happened. We cloned a site that wasn't ours and copied that wasn't ours and stood it up. When caught, we lied, if you will, unintentionally, but let's call a spade on this topic. And we never really recovered, even though I tried to apologize and back away. And, we obviously built a new site and we went back and looked at all the sites we've ever built and made sure that didn't happen. We began to correct it. But in that instance, his version was you stole something that wasn't yours, then you lied about it and you got defensive. And it was very frustrating for him, rightfully so.
Yeah.
That was a
Interesting.
mistake, Michael.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was, and it's in our culture document at the company, with his name and it tells the story. And the worst thing was, man, this was a good man. Like he
Yeah.
was not a dude who was trying to be anything other than just a good guy out there doing the world good work.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Um,
No, I appreciate that, man. Thank you for letting us know and being vulnerable about it. Yeah. So,
mhm, mhm.
number two is the unlikely mentor. Who in your life has given you the best business advice that was completely unexpected? And what was the advice?
The best advice I can remember being given, I had a manager young in my career that I don't think he was a particularly good manager, still to this day, but he looked at me one time in frustration and said, you have some great ideas, but you package them up terribly. And your communication around ideas is atrocious. And just walked away. And I was like, how dare you? Like, what? I don't think he was a bad guy or anything like that. He just wasn't great. He wasn't effective as a manager. He was more of a
Mhm.
politician than a manager, sort of thing. And I sit with that for a long time. And then I thought of all the times that I was feeling unheard on ideas. And it's true. I would get really excited about an idea or really excited about the prospect of an idea. And I would come to you, Michael, and just sort of bounce it off you almost to see what you see. And then I would sort of pivot around it. And at some point, instead of kind of standing firmly on my idea, I noticed that I was trying to sell you on like how smart I was or why I'm a great employee. Like it went from about the idea to like my identity, I think was beginning to happen in those early
Mhm.
days. It goes to show you can learn something for everyone. But yeah, a manager who I didn't think very fondly of as a manager gave me some of the best career advice I have, and that is take a minute. I am not my work. I am not my idea. Present an idea, articulate it clearly. I still think about him to this day. Funny enough. So when I think about presenting an idea and communicating clearly.
Nice. Okay. I like that, man. And then the third one is time travel. If you can go back in time and give your starting out self one piece of advice, but it can't be business related, what would it be?
I'm going to stay with the confidence and the stand firmly in your own truth. I misunderstood, even I was building my business, but as I have gone through my relationships, as I've been married for a while, as I've parented my kids, as I've had business partners, having a strong sense of identity and being comfortable in that. I wish I could go back and say, listen, like, not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to support you. Not everyone's going to believe in you. And that is okay. I spent a lot of my 30s and gosh, even 40s, to be honest, chasing approval, perhaps. I wish I would have had a stronger sense of self and not been so trying to please everyone as often as I did. That to me is the time travel. If someone doesn't like you, that may be more about them than it is about you, and that's okay too.
I love that.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time chasing approval.
Yeah. Interesting. Awesome, Eric. Thank you so much for being open with us and for all this information. We truly appreciate it. If anyone has any questions or concerns, where can they reach out to you directly?
I have a joke that's not a joke. If you can't Google pain-free dental marketing or Eric Hubbard and find me, I don't know that you should be looking for me as a marketing team. I think we better be everywhere. But just, hit Google pain-free dental marketing or search us up on ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using to search nowadays, and you're going to find us.
Nice. So that's going to be in the show notes below. And Eric, thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thanks, Michael.